Welcome to the AM Update, Week in Review. A collection of the best moments from Aaron McIntire's Morning Update.
The U.S. Army successfully met its 2025 recruiting goal, signing contracts with more than 61,000 future soldiers, a full 4 months before the end of the fiscal year. It marks a stunning turnaround for a service that failed to meet its recruiting goals in 2022 and 2023 and struggled in the years since to meet its annual targets. The U.S. Army said in a statement, quote, "The U.S. Army has successfully met its fiscal year 2025 recruiting goals for active duty, signing contracts with more than 61,000 future soldiers. This achievement represents a significant turning point for the Army and indicates a renewed sense of patriotism and purpose among America's youth." Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth reacted to the news late last week.
Is it the morale shift? What is happening?
Lawrence, it's historic. Of course it's a morale shift. It shifts back to the day President Trump was elected and then inaugurated. The spirit inside our armed forces is incredible. And it's not just the Army. You showed the Army numbers 4 months ahead of time. It's also the Air Force. It's also the Navy. It's also the Marine Corps, Coast Guard, and as the president says, law enforcement. I mean, across the board, the spirit of our country, the willingness and desire to serve, because they see leadership that believes in the country, that's going to have their back, that says, we want you to be warriors. We're not doing this politically correct garbage anymore. We're doing war fighting. We're training. We're preparing. We're focused on back to basics. And the American people respond. The young people of America have responded, and they'll continue to respond. So the question is, do we have enough slots in basic training?
A couple of weeks ago, I went to the send-off ceremony for a few hundred, part of 1,000 or more Iowa National Guardsmen who are set to be sent overseas, particularly to the Middle East. One of my longtime friends, childhood friends, one of those friends' first memories of life involved him. He is in the National Guard. Just had his first kid. She's less than 2 months old. And now her daddy is going to be gone for a year, an entire year. A couple of observations from that send-off ceremony. It was incredibly heartening. The send-off ceremony was very well attended. Hundreds of people, friends, family, going off to support and show support for their loved ones, their friends, who are going to be going to a foreign land. And I looked around and it's just salt of the earth people. Americans, real Americans right there. It's incredibly heartening. The same ceremony or a version of it took place, I think, in 3, 4, 5 different places around Iowa a couple of weeks ago. Hundreds of people paying their respects. It also shows you that there are still hundreds of young men, hundreds of men who are still willing to put their lives on the line, to make huge sacrifices, maybe, hopefully not, but maybe even the ultimate sacrifice to defend this country's interests. In the year 2025, that is still true. There are a lot of people out there, good people, salt of the earth people from places like Iowa who are ready to make those sacrifices. And I talked about my buddy, having a new baby at home. It's a huge sacrifice, not only for him not being around his family for a year, but also for his wife and little girl. I looked around and I saw the tearful goodbyes from loved ones to these servicemen in the Army. And I texted Bella and I said, "Aren't you glad I didn't join the military?" And I know that sounds a little bit sacrilegious in some way. But I recognize it was not so much a commentary of, I'm glad I'm not over there, so much of a commentary as, this is a huge deal. 1 year. The other observation I had, unfortunately, is, why are we still in the Middle East? What are we doing over there? I trust that maybe amongst all of President Trump's national security cabinet members, Pete Hegseth values these sacrifices that I'm talking about. So this is not pinning it on him. It's not necessarily pinning it on the commander-in-chief either. But I have no idea where my buddy is going in the Middle East. And last I talked to him, he didn't know either. What are we doing over there still? I don't know. If you have an answer for me, let me know at Real AM Update. But 2 observations off the heels of these staggering, ahead of schedules, recruitment numbers, and it's really across all of the armed forces, but especially in the Army. that people want to join when it's loud and clear that the junk, the social experiment that the Barack Obama administration turned, or at least tried to turn the military into, people want to join when it's loud and clear that that's ending, at least for the time being. It's really heartening to see that there are still hundreds of salt-of-the-earth Americans who are willing to make huge sacrifices to defend this country and protect its interests. But I'm also wondering, what are our interests in the Middle East?
You're listening to the AM Update, Week in Review. Follow on X and Instagram at RealAMUpdate.
And now, major changes ahead. Seismic changes, foundational changes in college athletics. A federal judge signed off on arguably the biggest change in the history of college sports on Friday, clearing the way for schools to begin paying their athletes millions as soon as next month as the multi-billion-dollar industry shreds the last vestiges of the amateur model that defined it for more than a century. Nearly 5 years after Arizona State swimmer Grant House, a swimmer who launched this lawsuit, which is making these seismic foundational changes in college athletics. Grant House sued the NCAA and its 5 biggest conferences to lift restrictions on revenue sharing. U.S. Judge Claudia Wilken approved the final proposal that had been hung up on roster limits, just one of many changes ahead, amid concerns that thousands of walk-on athletes will lose their chance to play college sports. The sweeping terms of the so-called House settlement include approval for each school to share up to $20.5 million a year with athletes over the next year, and $2.7 billion that will be paid back over the next decade to thousands of former players who were barred from that revenue for years. One of the lead plaintiff attorneys, Steve Berman, called Friday's news, quote, a fantastic win for hundreds of thousands of college athletes. The agreement brings a seismic shift to hundreds of schools that were forced to reckon with the reality that their players are the ones producing the billions in TV and other revenue, mostly through football and basketball, that keep that machine running. The scope of the change is just really mind-boggling to try to think about. The agreement will resonate in nearly every one of the NCAA's 1,100 member schools, boasting nearly 500,000 athletes. NCAA President Charlie Baker said the deal opens the pathway to begin stabilizing college sports. Absolutely wrong. I hope I am wrong about this, but anyone telling you that this House settlement will in any way, shape, or form bring about parity, bring about stability, bring about normalization of college athletics is wrong. They are just wrong. The reason why we got here in the first place, going back to the NCAA, and not allowing these athletes to actually capitalize on their name, image, and likeness for decades, they were not acting like the grown-ups in the room. The NCAA was making too much money off of these athletes, and they didn't want to risk that. They didn't want to risk that on ending the amateur model. But they could have done that. They could have allowed NIL decades ago, but they didn't, for one reason or another. So it started with them not acting like the grown-ups in the room. Eventually, there was going to be somebody, I believe it was that UCL, I think it was Ed O'Bannon, sued Electronic Arts for using his name, image, well, his image and likeness, at least his likeness, on the cover of one of their NCAA video games. That ended that video game series for a while and then ushered in the era of NIL for college athletes. Except it's not really NIL, it's not really Nike doing all of these endorsements, it's just very rich boosters forming collectives and just dumping boatloads of money into these players. Now, that money is not unlimited. That's my only kind of optimism with these developments, is that the big-time booster money will be constrained now. The boosters have the excuse of, well, you're paying the players now. But anybody saying that this is going to cause stability, no. We got here because there were absolutely no adults in the room, at least in the decision-making rooms, for decades. Has that changed? I don't think so. Now, I do not talk about sports hardly at all on the AM Update, but this is a massive news story, and I think you need to be informed. But we didn't get here through shrewd decision-making. through foresight or anything like that. So anybody telling you that this is a bucking of that trend is just wrong. We got here because too many people decided that it was money that was the priority and not the development of mind, body, soul, which was the point of college athletics, just like it was supposed to be the point of college in general. But no, there's just too much money, and that has been the driving impulse of college athletics for decades now. It's not going to get any better anytime soon. In the midst of the LA immigration riots, Vice President J.D. Vance posted this, quote, "One of the main technical issues in the immigration judicial battles is whether Biden's border crisis counted as a quote-unquote invasion. So now we have foreign nationals with no legal right to be in the country waving foreign flags and assaulting law enforcement. If only we had a good word for that." Then there's this post. I saw this from Patrick Casey at The Federalist. 40% of Los Angeles' residents were born in a foreign country. This is, I believe, from the Census Bureau. Approximately 59.4% of Los Angeles' residents. This is the second largest city in the country. Approximately 59.4% of Los Angeles' residents were born in the United States. 0.9% Puerto Rico, Guam, or other U.S. territories, or born abroad to American parents. Around 39.7% of the population was foreign born, with the majority, 64.5%, being born in Latin America. This is not San Antonio we're talking about. This is not some town in southern, along the border, although it is closer to the Mexican border. This is Los Angeles we're talking about, the second largest city in the United States. And 2 out of every 5 residents that you run into were not born in the United States. Next, Gavin Newsom, responding to Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, saying he's willing to deploy Marines if needed to quell the violence on the streets of Los Angeles. Here's Gavin Newsom, California governor. Quote, "The Secretary of Defense is now threatening to deploy active duty Marines on American soil against its own citizens. This is deranged behavior." Next, we go to this from California gubernatorial candidate Steve Hilton, who quotes a news release from the Los Angeles Police Department. Steve Hilton says, quote, "This is not a parody. This is from the actual police force in LA. No wonder California is such a mess with people like this in charge. Our brave police officers deserve better. What's that phrase, lions led by donkeys? What's the press release that Steve Hilton is talking about? The Los Angeles Police Department, as cars were being burned, as rocks were being thrown at ICE vehicles, as chaos ensued, foreign flags being waved in the streets as chaos reigned. Here's what the Los Angeles Police Department had to say. Today, demonstrations across the city of Los Angeles remained peaceful. So from J.D. Vance to the factoid about 40% of Los Angeles' residents being foreign born, to Gavin Newsom calling it deranged behavior to use the military to quell the violence, to uphold the God-given rights of Los Angeles and its citizens, to the Los Angeles Police Department in the midst of all of this, saying these demonstrations were peaceful. What's one word that synthesizes all 4 of those posts? It is polarized. We don't live in the same country as a lot of these people in the latter half of that 4-post montage that I just read for you. They live in a completely different world, a completely different culture. And there's no synthesizing that with what the Trump administration is trying to do. God bless them. There is a dangerous, insidious ideology behind all of this. And it is fundamentally, foundationally opposed to the ideals that America is supposed to be about. We are only going to get to a place of depolarization when that ideology is excised, removed, and obliterated. Anybody who even jokes about believing in open borders, the great replacement, Anybody who even engages in tangential discussions about that is laughed from polite society. How can you share a country with a governor of a state that's being ripped apart by violence from foreign-born criminals, waving the flags of countries that are not the United States, and says it's deranged behavior to get that under control? That's the governor of that state. And that city's own police department said that those fiery protests were peaceful. How do you share a country with that? Answer: you can't. Whatever's driving that has to be defeated.
You're listening to the AM Update, Week in Review. Follow on X and Instagram at Real AM Update.
This feels weird after using and incorporating Siri into the presentation here today, as I did earlier. What you did not hear, though, is it took about 5 to 10 minutes for me to get 2 lines out of Siri. Because Siri is just that dumb. And in the world of incredible, they really are incredible and fascinating AI chat boxes, it is embarrassing to Apple. And it's embarrassing to this country, really, because Apple is our premier company. That Siri, its automated voice assistant, is so terrible. I'm sure you've heard videos like this before. Let me play this for you.
Change my nickname.
Okay, what would you like me to call you?
H-A-H-A-H-A-H-A-H-A-H-A-H-A-H-A-H-A-H-A.
You would like me to call you
It always cracks me up trying to make Siri say weird things, and it's hard to do. I did that just for fun late last week. After it got through doing the thing that it does, I said, "That's okay, Siri. Don't change my name." I changed my mind. So then Siri tried to change my name to Mind. Siri is so dumb. Nevertheless, though, I was assured that this week at the Worldwide Developers Conference, Apple would be announcing some upgrades and maybe some implementation of some more advanced features with its text and audio-based help. Well, Apple kicked off its annual Worldwide Developers Conference this week with an array of announcement on new features coming this fall to iOS 26, its latest operating system upgrade. Leading the pack of these announcements is its new graphic user interface announcement and enhancement called Liquid Glass. CEO Tim Cook and other Apple executives used words like beautiful, gorgeous, and delightful to describe changes on the horizon for its devices. And while they emphasized a fresh user interface and elevated app features, they also reassured users that the tools would remain familiar and accessible. So that was the big news coming out of Apple's Worldwide Developers Conference, is that they're getting a new, shiny new graphic user interface. Liquid Glass. What does that even mean? It sounds incredible. Sounds magical even. It can't be a liquid and a glass at the same time. Basically what this is, it's a new paint job. It's just a paint job. That's all it is. This country's premier consumer tech company, Apple, has a stupid voice assistant. An embarrassingly stupid voice assistant. And they are already way behind in the AI arms race. And their big idea is a new coat of paint. They're basically the fat Elvis of the tech world. No real innovation. No real innovation. All we've got is a fresh coat of paint. Elvis, best I got, man. It's Unchained Melody for the 100th time. Still sounds great. Still got great chops and pipes. Apple, best I got is a new coat of paint. Looks great. Same stuff. There's no innovation with this company anymore. I know we've talked about this before. And I guess I should give them some credit, some legit credit. Their M-class processors integrated with their now computers and tablets and phones. Those are really good. But that's about the only innovation they've done over the last 10 to 15 years. And in the midst of all of the news, all of the consternation about AI and integrating that into everything, and I know I'm supposed to come on here and say, hey, the sky is falling, AI is going to take over the world. It's coming whether we wish it to or not. So you have to deal with the fallout from that one way or another. But their big innovation, liquid glass. Hey, we got this used car and we put a new coat of paint on it. Please buy. Is it time to start expecting more from some of our leading, we're supposed to believe they're innovators? Because this isn't cutting it. It's just not. They tried to innovate a few years ago with their wearable goggles or whatever they're called. That kind of went nowhere. And now their big development this cycle is a new fresh coat of paint on their operating system. It's kind of getting too embarrassing all around when it comes to Apple. And finally, poll of the week. I asked you, there are planned protests all over the country for this Saturday, June 14th. Headlines on Sunday morning will be, I gave you 3 options and the ability to comment, and boy howdy, I got a lot of feedback. Here are the results, though, of the precast answers that I gave you to pick from. In third place, a few riots at 28.4%. That's where I am. I think there actually will be a few riots this weekend, or at least attempts at riots this weekend. 28.4%. Also tied for second place, big fat nothing at 28.4%. You think that nothing really tangible is going to come from these protests around the country, the No Kings protest. And then in first place, America on Fire. That's going to be the headline Sunday morning. 33.1% of you say we're going to be on fire come this Sunday. Here's what you had to say specifically, though. Mary says, true patriots honor the many flags of America. That's going to be the headline Sunday morning. I could see that. Scott says, mostly peaceful gatherings of people having fun watching things give off a warm, comforting light. That's the headline Scott thought of. Yeah, you heard that. I think it was a local news reporter talking about how a lot of these protesters and rioters in Los Angeles, they were just having fun watching cars burn, as one does. Redacted says it's either going to be a nothing to see here or America on fire. Totally depends on how the day goes. Justin says headlines is the key word in the question. Here's his headline. The people rise up to protest Trump's tyranny will be the gist of the headlines. Obviously, yes, if there actually are riots. Auburn says Trump causes riots across America. Already seen some of those. ID Crisis says news will use whatever tactics Trump employs as proof he is literally Hitler. Low-hanging fruit there. Keith says the words mostly peaceful will be overused. Bet your house on that. Rhino says sounds like good places for mass deportations. You know, it was my thought earlier this week that preemptively Trump and the White House should activate the National Guard in like the 20 biggest cities just as a preventative or readiness measure. Rhino Hunter, I think maybe a better idea is activating ICE at all of these different planned protests because you're onto something. Dylan says something to do with Father's Day. That is right. Father's Day is this weekend. Live Free or Die says mostly peaceful grassroots movement impresses across nation. That's going to be the headline. Live Free says. Lynn says another headline will be this. Trump causes otherwise hardworking, law-abiding migrants and all who care about democracy to rise up and protest against tyranny. Liberty says it'll probably be more of the tone of a groundswell of local grassroots protests. Yes, because that's exactly what this is. Grassroots protest. Not bankrolled by one of the Walmart heiresses at all. So Liberty, that's a good take. Let's do a few more. Emmanuel Mueller says mostly peaceful protests were organized. Regular Dirk says, I almost said dork there. Sorry, Dirk. Regular Dirk says Trump's tyrannical policies trigger national backlash. I'm sensing a theme here. Whatever is the opposite of reality is what the headlines are going to be come Sunday morning.
This has been the AM Update Week in Review. The AM Update will be back on Monday and every weekday at 4 a.m. Eastern Time.